Thousand Tales presents Prey by Scott Godfrey, read by Matthew Carson. The Merbal hate. No, the word hate is not strong enough. I have tried to find the proper word but can't. Hate is merely the closest, smallest shard to the limits of their rage. We didn't know they existed. Not at first. Later, we found out the limits of our understanding. I was a detective. I dealt with sexually based crimes, and I can tell you rape is one of the most horrific things I've ever come across. True murderers get more time, but after 5 years, knowing victims younger than my experience, I have found that the limits of human depravity do not exist. At least with murders, the victim's pain has an end. So, when this victim was found, I had to smile. His name was John Andrax, and he was a pedophile. We knew it. Courts knew it. He had received a light sentence, and he had been out for a few months. And he was dead. I had to actually see it myself. I went to the morgue, and he was lying there, peaceful, and I wanted to have him suffer more, and a cold rage in me was there, and I stifled it. How did he die? I asked. The coroner was named Vanessa Pauldrake. She was in her late 40s, usually affable, and she looked unhappy. Then she pulled the sheet back to reveal his body. Now, I had heard he had died violently, but I'd never imagined how violently. His skin had been ripped apart. His ribcage jutted upward as if someone had pulled it out violently, and his genitals were gone. I don't know how someone did this to him, she said. I've never seen anything like this before. It was the ribcage that made her unhappy. Cuts, genital mutilation, that happens. But pulling someone's ribcage out requires an impossibility. Either a machine was used, or the guy swallowed a small grenade. Not totally impossible, but not practical either. I went back up, uncertain of my feelings. Of course, a man was dead, and we had to find his killer. But I had talked to his victims. I felt little incentive to close the case. Of course, I wasn't assigned to it. I knew the detectives who would be investigating. Good, stalwart, methodical. They'd get him. I just didn't think they should. I sat at a desk I'd used for half a decade and thought about the victims. Then thought about Johnson. I rose and went to my captain's office. I need to go for a walk, I told my captain simply. He nodded, guessing at where my thoughts led. Between having a detective ruminating on a dead pedophile or a detective clearing cases, giving me an hour to deal with things would put me back to work. The captain knew when I came back, work would be done. It had been before. I left. The streets were warm. It was summer, and the city shimmered with heat, and I didn't know where my feet led me, but I decided to simply wander, let my mind be free of all distraction, and let my unconscious free rein. I admit, a strange thing to do, but I couldn't let go of the satisfaction of his death, and I couldn't let go of the fact that the one responsible had killed. So I walked. Sometimes I remembered the cries of his victims, and other times recalled his smug smile in court. But someone had killed him, someone powerful. I walked to where his body had been, out in an alley. The police had cordoned it off, but I could see enough, smell garbage, blood. I showed the officer on duty my badge, asked for some details. The officer shook his head sadly. He didn't really know anything. I couldn't blame him. The crime scene was obvious, bloody. As I stared at it, I realized it was also impossible. I could see the blood, but there were no bloodstains beyond the radius of his death. The alley was too small for a machine to get through, for anything industrial. He had clearly not been moved to this spot. So why was the blood pooled to a single point? I kept walking after that, then turned back. I took one more look at the pool of blood, realized the absurdity of the death, and returned to work. I didn't think about him. I compartmentalized his death the best I could. I dealt with a case involving a child who'd been sexually molested by her father, a lateral move. I went home at the proper hour, home to a cold apartment and time to think. Had it been simply him, I might have gone on with my life as before. We had made a difference, we helped, and I felt that my life had purpose. In my rooms, the images of children kept haunting me. I suppose it happens to everyone, but more than once I'd walked into my apartment to imagine children there, innocent ghosts of someone I'd met today or the previous day. Tonight was no different. I entered my apartment and smelled something familiar. Hair of some child, perhaps. Scent faded. Got a beer, sat in an old chair, and thought. I drifted to sleep. When I awoke, I heard the television. I hadn't turned it on, though. I felt sure of that. It was a news report. There had been another. No, there had been others. I stood staring at the information in mute shock. 2 of the men I'd known. I'd helped convict them, and they were dead. What was going on? It wasn't just happening here. Cities all across the country had reports like this. The victims were always the same. Men, later women, guilty of sexual crimes. Rapists, pedophiles. Dead. One act of vigilantism, however extreme, can elicit in anyone, depending on the target, a lack of sympathy. But 2,000 individuals whose bodies were ripped apart, 3,000 in a night. We were assigned. Everyone was assigned. This was top priority now. Someone had managed to kill without leaving evidence. This was no longer a matter of the justification of someone's death. This was an act of war. But who were the soldiers involved? I returned to Pauldrake to ask if she had any more information to give. She had less. There was no sign of the methodology used. No tool marks on the ribcage, no shavings of metal or even flesh. Something had ripped him apart and left no sign of how it had been done. The others were identical. 3,000 people were dead. Men and women gutted like animals, and there was no discernible method to this. For a moment, I imagined myself, or someone like me across the cities, asking this same question, but shook myself back and went upstairs. The easiest solution was, of course, the best. Track them. Follow the trail from their point of death to where they were last seen alive. Go further. See the connections. See what had drawn someone to them. So, some of the detectives involved followed him to his apartment further back. I decided to follow the victimology of those he had targeted. After all, if each one was guilty, following the victims would lead to the ones responsible. That was my reasoning. So while some detectives followed the normal path of his life, where he worked, what he did as a normal individual, I decided to see if he had raped any children while he had been out. I had been lucky because at his apartment there was mention of a child, small little thing, kind of prey he would have looked forward to. Did anyone know who this child was? No one knew. But someone, an old woman, had mentioned she'd seen the child in a white dress near the alley. Why hadn't she mentioned this to the police? Because we'd never done anything before, she said. I suppose it often seemed that way. Could she describe the child? Small, maybe 6, with brown hair and blue eyes, wearing a white dress. Shining teeth. I thought it odd she'd remember the teeth, But she shrugged. The teeth were white, shining, an open smile. I spent the day searching for the little girl. Maybe her parents were responsible. But no, and even if they were, that wouldn't explain anything else. At the end of the day, I returned to the precinct, and I noticed everyone was deeply uncomfortable. Every man, every woman was nervously fidgeting. It was like they'd been told a storm was coming and there had been no way to get out of the rain. "Detective," the captain came forward with a small man by his side. "Yes, look, I'm sorry, but I don't have any progress to report." He raised a hand. "We know what's responsible." "We do?" I asked. Dr. Primrose spent the last 20 minutes explaining things. "Considering your involvement and you missing the lecture, I want you to talk to him now." "Sir, what's going on?" Dr. Primrose stepped forward and smiled weakly. "I'm sorry to say, the fault is mine," he said. "Are you aware of deep embedded stellar exploration?" "What do you think?" I shot back. "Of course. My apologies." He took his glasses off and rubbed them absently. "We have sent probes to a few extrasolar planets. On one we found life." "You're kidding me," I said. "No. Small species on an Earth-like world, harmless. Mostly harmless. Resembled, well, the fact is they resemble anything small and helpless, anything a predator considers prey." He looked up at me earnestly. I started to understand. "And these things are here? We're dealing with aliens?" I asked. "Yeah, that's a little out of left field," I said. "Just the tiniest bit." "Yeah," he said, and smiled weakly. "Again. And they are the dominant form of life on their world. Just said they resemble prey. To attract predators. To attract what organisms they feed on. The ultimate form of attack. They resemble whatever you want to destroy or kill or worse, and when your guard is down, they'll do the same to you." The captain was sitting quietly in a corner. He had heard all this before. Explain how they got here. Explain why they're here. "Ah, yes. Well, that's why we've opened the books on this. Why they sent me from NASA to talk with you. You see, when we first discovered them, we assumed they were harmless. We brought a few back. We never understood the true danger of them till they met us at our worst." Our worst? Suddenly, I had it. I imagined the creatures taken from their homes, and here in a strange land they'd encountered a predator. Maybe a god, maybe a scientist. And what would the scientist have seen? Or the god? Administrator, prey. They escaped after that, he said simply. My imagery of the scene faded to be replaced by the drying pools of blood. Ours. How many of them are there? I asked. We don't know, he said. Their life cycle is faster than. How many were there, and when did they escape? 5 months ago, they escaped. There were 200 of them who managed to get out. And you didn't mention this till now? I looked at him in shock. They didn't do anything till now. Frankly, we had hope. Infection had killed them. We were just hoping they would go away. Isn't that what your profession is all about? I shot a look at him, at his last comment. I wondered how he had managed to stay alive. Then I thought over what he had said. So, 5 months. 5 months imitating prey. And if humans were predators, then too often prey were our own offspring. I had a terrible realization in that moment. I imagined these beings moving from city to city, growing in number, waiting, watching. And what would they have seen? Hidden rooms, children crying, unseen masses, every sort of casual brutality visited upon individuals with no chance to fight back. Chains, screams, and whispers of not saying a word, and then, too often when a child escaped what would happen to the predators, on their world anything predatory was their prey. And I imagined myself in their position then. I had been taken from my home and thrown amongst a species who routinely beat and abused its own children. I discovered that wherever I went, some portion of the creatures who'd captured me would attempt to do more than attack. And what would I do to such creatures? I felt sick. They'd imagine we were monsters. And now, after 5 months, they decided they'd waited long enough. What do you expect us to do? I asked. The creatures must be found and stopped. I had enough. I rose and turned to go. Detective, the captain rose and turned to me. I don't believe what you're saying, I lied. Aliens, far distant worlds, monsters. It doesn't make any sense to me. I'll just investigate this like anyone would in my shoes. The only monsters in the world are human beings, sir. That's it. I turned and left the room. It has now been 20 months. The number of slain has grown, and many times individuals have attempted to stop this. Politicians have preached. Scientists have explained. Religious leaders have argued that whatever these abominations are must die. But they only appear as children to 2 kinds of people. The first are the monsters, who see them as prey. Seconds later, the form explodes outward to something I've never been able to describe. But they also appear, less frequently, to people who see them as helpless and hope to look after them. I know because I saw one of them once. I was standing on a sidewalk and noticed a girl with brown hair and blue eyes wearing a white dress, and she turned to me and smiled, and I could see the white teeth, imagining how savage she could be. Perhaps she, or one like her, had been in my apartment all those months ago. Like I said, I saw her briefly. She turned and I saw what her kind truly looked like. Just a moment, as if to say that they would be all right, that they can look after themselves. I don't know if this means their hatred only extends to the ones they see as predators, or if they see people like me as prey and are whispering to us, "It's okay. We won't hurt you. We promise." The end.